The Maple Leafs ranked top 10 in contract efficiency, according to The Athletic, in which Maple Leafs are destined to represent their countries at the Milan 2026 Winter Games. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like you want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling on a Friday?
Excited for the beginning of the Olympics, but also dumbfounded by this whole Canada soccer scandal.
Explain this to me. I haven't, to be completely fair, the last couple of days I've been not really paying all that much attention to the sporting world. I've just kind of I've been one of those headline readers over the last couple of days. What exactly is going on here? Like they flew a drone? Who flew the drone? And I saw the latest is that they've suspended the head coach. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, so there were reports. There was essentially two assistant coaches were caught eavesdropping, I guess, spying on Canada's upcoming opponent at the Olympics. It was New Zealand. One of the coaches was flying a drone, and you can't do that. So actually, two coaches got caught. One was actually got a suspended 8-month sentence for flying the drone, because you can't just fly drones wherever you want without proper.
Was that from Canada or the IOC?
That was so the coach that got charged, that was by French police.
Oh,
so yeah, this became a police matter. The IOC obviously got involved. Canada. So now, because it's the Olympics, the Canadian Olympic Committee was the one that had to deal with the punishments and stuff. So those two staffers were sent home. The coach for Canada decided, I will recuse myself for the first game, as kind of a I can't put myself in this situation. And it turns out that there's a little more to it than just the one time. And there's actually past instances involving drones being used to capture close practices. So essentially the Canada Soccer and the Canadian Olympic Committee basically told Priestman, you're going home. Like, you're done you're not even going to be coach for the Olympics. She is suspended. She hasn't been fired yet, but I would assume that down the road there's going to be a little more to this. But we got Drone Gate to start.
Oh man, she was really just doing her best Bill Belichick impression. I mean, Bill.
I wouldn't say that was the last time I've ever seen anything like this in the sporting world.
Spygate back in the Belichick days.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, not once, twice he got caught. Twice.
Was one of them like the Bengals or something? It was like
Bengals, and it was like the year that they were terrible, and he had, I don't know, some scout or something that was like watching their practice, and oh yeah, it was ridiculous, and they were a terrible team. It made no sense why they were scouting them, but yeah, that was the first thing that it made me think of. And hey, back then a lot of people said if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So it's on a lighter note, I guess you could say that about the Canadian women's soccer team. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Obviously, now they're without a head coach. Someone who was supposed to try and lead them to win a consecutive gold medal, try and retain their gold medals from 2021, and now they'll have to do so without their main bench boss. I guess not bench boss, sideline field. I don't know what the hell you call them in soccer, I guess, but their head coach won't be there. So we'll see what they can do. Obviously, the Olympic Games kicks off tonight, though, with the opening ceremonies. I'll definitely be taking a peek at that. Going to be watching some opening ceremonies. Who is it? Andre DeGrasse and who is the other Canadian? I'm blanking right now.
It's a weightlifter.
Yeah,
Maud Sharon, I think is her. I think that's how. I think that's Maud Sharon is the other one. She won gold in Tokyo in weightlifting.
yeah. So the two those are the two flag bearers for the Canadians, and good luck to all of the Canadian athletes. We'll be rooting you on all the way from here. Gold, Canada gold, as we always say. With that, we thought that we'd do a little bit of an Olympic theme to our Friday 5-pack. And if you're new to the podcast or you haven't been watching the last couple Fridays, we've been debuting this segment every Friday for the off season. We're doing a Friday 5-pack, basically a power ranking, a list of some kind where we figure out what we want to power rank. And this week we're doing 5 Leafs who are most likely to represent their country at the 2026 Olympic Games. So all 5 of these players may not be guaranteed to make the Olympic Games, but these are the 5 players that we find most likely to make it. So we'll do that list in a moment. We'll do that in a little bit. There was an interesting article that came out in The Athletic today, actually. Dom Lucian, who does really great work with The Athletic, and he's got his model that projects, contract values, that projects point values, really anything. It's just like a projection model for the NHL. And he was able to kind of put together an efficiency ranking among all of the teams in the league based on the team's salary cap relative to the players' projected cap based on their projected performance going forward for the remainder of that player's current contract. So that was kind of the article and the ranking that he made for this. And the Maple Leafs actually ranked pretty well in this ranking for cap efficiency. They ranked 8th among all 32 teams. So in the top quarter of the team, I suppose, top 25% of the teams. So 8th in terms of cap efficiency, considering where this team has been in the past in terms of cap efficiency. I think we can say that Tree Living's done a pretty good job to clean up some of the messes that have been left by his predecessor.
Yeah, I mean, namely just kind of spreading it out a little bit more, balancing, right? Not throwing a whole lot of money towards like a couple players, try to find a bit of a balance there. But I also just think that, you look at how contracts are done now, it's kind of like, this is the going rate for this type of player. This is the going rate for this type of player. But it's also recognizing when to get guys signed, right? Getting Bobby McMahon signed during the season when he was kind of picking things up a little bit, right? Like a deal like that, banking on Joseph Woll to really, take that big step forward, but also trying to get some value in his contract, but do it before the peak of his value, right? I think in that article, he talked about Nylander's value at one point was like $8.5 million. Then it got up to 11.5 when he was, producing at a high rate, and then it went down when he kind of took a little bit of a detour. So like the Leafs signed him at his peak, like things like that. It's hard when that's like a situation where it's like, all right, the Leafs were kind of had their hands tied, and they realized that, and they just got the contract done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a lesson learned to try to get other ones done and prevent that from happening. Although we're heading into that.
Yeah. Same problem with Mitch Marner this upcoming season. So we'll see what happens if they really did learn their lesson. I don't know if they did, to be honest with you. We'll bring it up in just a moment. What everyone's projected value was, and every player actually has been given a letter grade in terms of their own personal contract efficiency rating, I suppose. So we'll be able to show you what Dom Lucian's model graded each player at with their cap and their projected values. But yeah, I think overall though, what I meant by that is, cleaning up the work of the predecessor is in the past you could look and there was some dead weight, right? There were some contracts that you could just trade off to create cap base. There's not a whole lot of that anymore, right? I think everyone's contract is pretty well like what you would expect it to be. And there's no one out there where it's like, okay, we need to create cap space by moving off of that guy, right? Like the Patrick Marlowe isn't there. The cap dumps. There's no real significant cap dump. You can make an argument, David Camp or Cali Yarncroc. But like that's not a significant one. And they're not necessarily underperforming as much as you would think to what their value is to the team either. But we'll get into that in just a moment. Why don't we take a quick break and then we'll come back? We'll take a look at all of the contracts for the Maple Leafs and see what Dom valued them and graded them out as. And then we'll get to our Friday 5-pack, 5 Leafs most likely to play for their countries in the 2026 Olympic Games. Get to all that and more coming up next on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's podcast brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much and never want them to stop. But as far as playoffs, as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sports like I want them to. FanDuel lets me keep the sports whenever I want. All I got to do is open up the app, dream up any bets anytime I'm in the mood, and bam. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Network. Hello and welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you. As always, here on the Locked On Leafs pod, you can find us wherever you stream your podcast from AudioWise, and we are also free and available over on YouTube. Just search up Locked On Leafs, hit subscribe, and leave a like if you are enjoying this video and you're watching on YouTube, and let us know down below. I'm curious to hear who you guys believe, before I even put it on the screen in just a moment, who do you guys believe has the most efficient cap for the Toronto Maple Leafs? That's excluding ELC players, by the way. So no one who has an ELC. So Matthew Nyes is actually excluded from this. Just players who are assigned to actual their second contract or more. So I'll give you a couple seconds to write down, post it, give us a comment, maybe pause for a second if you want it, but let us know down below, who do you think is the most cap efficient contract on the Maple Leafs roster? And with that, Dave, why don't we take a look at these rosters? I'll pull it up here. So we've got it. All right. So here it is. Austin Matthews was the answer. Austin Matthews has, according to Dom Luszczyszyn's model, the most efficient contracts among all players on the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think I can zoom in just a little bit more, make it a little easier for us to read here. Austin Matthews model projection, $18.4 million. That's what Dom's model projects him at, which means that is his surplus of $5.1 million in surplus value, I suppose, compared to what his actual contract of 13.3 is, which means over the course of 4 years, the projected total surplus value is over $20 million. So that gets an A+ grade. Did you think Austin Matthews is going to be at the top of this list, knowing that he is the highest paid player in the league and still an absolute bargain compared to Dom's model, I guess, projection model?
I'm not totally surprised just because he does value star players a lot higher in terms of their market value, like clear-cut star players, right? I would say that I was less surprised with Matthews and more so surprised about Nylander. Like that's kind of how.
So Nylander, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for Nylander to be, I mean, let's at this rate, it's 10. Like I know it says 9.9 million, but that's essentially $10 million. For him to be at $10 million in terms of his value, I thought that to be quite interesting.
You thought it'd be more or less, or like?
I thought it would be closer to like to that $11 million.
So I think the issue though is he doesn't give you a lot of like defensive value,
Yeah.
right? Like you look at Mitch Marner, he's at 12.1. And the reason why I think his model values it at 12.1 is because he has a much higher defensive rating. Um, where Nylander does not. So I think that's the biggest difference there. Like offensively, yes, him and Marner might be comparable in terms of offensive value, but it's that defensive value that I think allows Marner to be worth more, and Nylander not to be worth nearly as much at just $9.9 million, according to Dom's model value. Which is a surplus of negative 1.6 million. So according to Dom, he's worth about 10 million a year, which we talked about this last summer, a lot, that should have been pretty much the contract, right? Sign him at 10, 10, 5 if you have to, over a 7, 8 year stretch, and let's get this contract done with. They decided to go into the year, and as you were alluding to previously, he worked his value up to about $11.5 million, and that's the exact same time the Maple Leafs decided to sign him to that 8 year contract, and then he kind of withered away a little bit down the stretch, and that's why his model, rounded out at 9.9. Given a D rating for that contract, by the way, a D rating over the course of the next 8 years, it's expected to provide negative $12.7 million in what's the opposite of a surplus? Like negative $12 million is what it's projected to give you for the Maple Leafs in terms of their cap dollars. So yeah, Nylander being at the lowest on this list, a little bit surprising. Are you surprised to see that Mitch Marner, according to the model, again, is outperforming his contract by over $1 million?
I'm surprised just because like when he signed his deal, he was the highest paid winger in the league at the time when he signed it, and frankly, there was models that would suggest that he hasn't been the best winger in the league, right? But as you suggest, and as I can probably understand now, it's his defensive, what he does defensively that gives him that bump. If let's say he wasn't on the top power play killing unit, if he wasn't, a Selke level forward as he's shown the last few years, he probably isn't a surplus player. Like he's probably just under that. He's probably close in around that Nylander range. But yeah, I can see why Dom values him a lot higher for sure.
Yeah. Anything else kind of stick out to you with the forward group in terms of the model value in comparison to their actual value? Any grade that kind of shocked you a little bit?
Ryan Reeves, I thought he would have been like way lower. I know he's not making a whole. I know he's not making like a lot of money, but at the same time, like we've always talked about that deal, and I'm surprised that.
Well, Dave, here's the thing. What's league minimum?
Is 850 or no?
I think it's 800 grand. I think it's 800. That's what the model value is, league minimum. So like and that's what he was graded out as, I guess. So I think it's just because it's a he probably has like a range where if you get to a certain point, it's a C plus, B minus, just based on your surplus value, I guess. So like literally he could only be as low as a C plus based on those numbers. I think I could be wrong.
That's the part I don't get. Like I understand that, like he's not signed to a lot, so the red, like how much that the difference is. But you would think that it would be a lot lower in terms of a contract grade, but I guess it's just the way the numbers kind of spill out there.
Yeah, like that's why you got to put context behind some things, right? And why it's not 100% accuracy. Like I think we would all agree that Ryan Reeves' contract is significantly worse than Max Domi's contract, but somehow Reeves grades out better than Domi. Reeves grades out better than David Kampf. But I would much prefer Domi's contract and Domi over the next 4 years than I would Ryan Reeves and that contract over the next 2 years. So it's It's not a perfect model, obviously. Then there's a little bit of context needed for it. Why don't we take a look at the defense? We could take a look at the defense because this one kind of surprised me. He's got Timothy Liljegren at 6.3
Yeah.
model value. I was blown away by that. He has Timothy Liljegren grading out as a better player than Jake McCabe. That I just simply and Chris Tanev and OEL. And I simply just don't quite understand that one.
Yeah, I don't know what Timothy. I know like the analytics have looked favorable on him, like especially this past year, but to be that high,
6.3?
yeah, like
6.3 million? What?
I know Dom has always been a huge Timothy Liljegren fan. I know it. I just don't see 6.3. Like I'm
I don't
sorry.
either.
Like maybe the 4 million range if you want to be generous, but that just kind of just shows like I don't know any team that would think that Timothy Liljegren is valued at 6.3 million.
And his surplus, an annual surplus of 3.3 million. So according to Dom's model, he's worth 3.3 million more than the 3 million that he's making. I thought 3 million was an overpayment. Personally, I'm like, why the heck did you have to sign Liljegren to $3 million? What has he done to earn a $3 million 2-year deal? To me, he has not earned that at all. Like I thought he'd be coming in between 2 and maybe 2.5, 2.5 max. According to the model, he's worth over 6. That's what I do not understand. Might have to text Dom a little bit and just get to the bottom of it and find out why he graded out so high. In comparison to maybe some other guys. Like the fact that he's 6.3 and Jake McCabe's only 5.9, I just don't get it. I really, really don't understand how he's got Liljegren as a better player, I guess, or more valuable player than Jake McCabe. OEL and Chris Tanev, though, both given C's. Two of the guys that the Maple Leafs brought in via free agency. He does have Yanni Hakanpää in here, which I find hilarious because we still don't know what's going on with Yanni Hakanpää. But Tanev and OEL, both given C grades, and their annual surplus coming in at negative value, negative 0.5 million for Tanev over 6 years, and then $1 million as a negative surplus for OEL over the next 4 years. OEL I could see just because I think there's been some warts in his game for the last couple of seasons. Surprised to see Chris Tanev, and maybe that's just because it stretches out over 6 years. So that might be it, where those years, 4, 5, 6 projects to be a little bit worse. I guess that's probably where that comes in.
Yeah, I that's probably my guess is the amount of that it's over the 6 years kind of pushes that the surplus up. Like I was kind of, and the OEL one again, I can get it. So then I look to see, okay, how does he look at like guys like Ilya Lyubushkin, who the Star signed?
Mm-hmm.
He has them both like him. Yeah, Lyubushkin and Dumbo, both who were the kind of brought in by Dallas there. Both at like market value, like pretty much better minimum deals, right? So the surplus is like quite high on that for those ones. So I like the OEL one I can live with that. We knew that they were gonna have to pay a little bit more for the blue line. Blue liners got paid a lot more than they should have in some cases. But I still think like the Leafs, yeah, it's probably because it's the 4 years. If they didn't sign to 4 years, they probably don't have that massive surplus with that.
Yeah, and that was included in the model, right? When you're talking about a model value, right? They're taking the entire contract, right? What's the contract going to be projected at in year 1? What is 3.5 million projected at in year 2, year 3, and year 4? So according to him, you put all of that together, that culminates in him being worth about 2.5 million annually is the value he's going to be able to bring through all 4 years. Therefore, that's why they have him as a total surplus of about $4 million in the negatives, taking a C grade for both of the blue line additions for the Maple Leafs. Goaltending, Dom loves him. Dom has a big fan of the goaltending, or at least the model's a big fan of the goaltending. Joseph Woll, who signed a nice new shiny deal this summer, 2.9 over 4 years. That's incredible value, $3.9 million surplus according to Dom Lucian's model. He projects him as a $6.9 million annual AAV player if he can stay healthy. That is the big if. If healthy, Woll has shown that he could play to the capabilities of a near $7 million player. So that's why Joseph Woll gets an incredible A plus on his contract grade by Dom's model.
I mean, you just saw what Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen just got with Buffalo. It was 5 years, 4.75.
Yeah, I
So
didn't hate that. I'll be honest. I didn't
yeah,
hate
it's
that.
it's not a terrible deal. This is teams trying now to bank on those younger goaltenders, right? Usually goaltenders it's tough because you see some of them get paid a little bit later, like the Saros, Bobrovskis. They kind of have to cash it a little bit later before they incrementally see their pay go up. Like to get the true but topping out on your deal, it takes a little bit longer for goaltenders, right? So obviously with the Leafs here, the Woll, obviously that contract's not until the following year because he still has one more year on that deal that Dubas signed. So yeah, this year will all be about, funny enough, justifying the contract extension that hasn't even kicked in yet.
Yeah, true. Very, very true. And Anthony Stolarz, he's a big fan of too. Consider him the best value goaltender on the market via free agency. So bringing him in, his contract of $2.5 million over the next 2 years has a $4 million surplus over the next couple of years, over $2 million annually, grades out as a B for Anthony Stolarz. All right. So let's take a quick break and then let's come back and let's get into our Friday 5-pack. We're taking a look at five Leafs most likely to play at the 2026 Olympic Games. So we'll get to that on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here on the Locked On Leafs pod. We're taking a look at our Friday 5-pack for today. It is the kickoff to the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. And we thought it'd be fun to kind of tie in an Olympic theme into our Friday 5-pack today because of that. So we thought, let's take a look and try and see if we can give ourselves a power ranking for the 5 Maple Leafs who are most likely to play at the 2026 Olympic Games for their country. So, not to say that there is 5 guys that are for sure going to be on the team, but 5 guys who are most likely to play at the Olympic Games in a couple of years. Finally, we got best on best hockey. So it'll be nice to see that in a couple of years. So we'll see how many Maple Leafs are part of that tournament. So you want to start at the bottom or you want to start up at the tippy top?
Let's start at the top because I think some are obviously more obvious than others.
All right, sounds good. Obviously, yeah. So at the top, number 1, Austin Matthews, guaranteed lock. Barring injury, I suppose.
Yeah.
But guaranteed lock to make Team USA. 69 goals. Arguably the best American, born player in the game today. Certainly, maybe certainly today, maybe even of all time. He could certainly work his way into that conversation over the next few years. But Austin Matthews definitely will be on Team USA in 2026.
Yeah, no doubt he's gonna be their top guy, right? Like that USA roster is going to be a tough one, especially goaltending. It's gonna be unfair what they're gonna be able to throw out there for goaltenders versus what
they got some good defense too. Like that's the whole team, top to bottom, is going to be unbelievable. But yeah, we always talk about the disparity between the American goaltenders and the Canadian goalies. Like you could probably go 4, 5 American goalies deep before we get to the net to the best Canadian goaltender. If we were to put together a power ranking, maybe we could, fit that in next week potentially. Take a look at the top 5 North American goaltenders, maybe just because I think it'd be interesting to see how far we get before getting to a Canadian. But yeah, Austin Matthews certainly the guy for USA. He's going to be at the Olympics. Another guy that I think is going to be a lock, and we got him at number 2 on our list, is going to be Willie Styles, William Nylander, Bill Nye, the Rishon guy. I think for sure he ends up on Team Sweden in a couple of years as well.
Yeah, he's one that's always performed well internationally for Sweden too. So that's Sweden is good. That Sweden team's going to be. That one's a tough one to figure out. Like they got some deep, like they got a good mix of like younger and veteran players, but it's going to be a very different team than what I think we've come to see from Sweden. So Nylander's going to probably be one of their, if not maybe the top forward for them going into the Olympics.
Well, you think about it. I mean, the last Olympics they were at 2014. I mean, think about how different the league is from back then. Like Zetterberg would have still been on that team. Alfredson still would have been on that team. Who did they have in net there forever? That
Lundqvist.
Was always, yeah, Lundqvist was the big dog back there. So yeah, it's gonna look vastly different for sure. But I do think that Nylander is one of the best, Swedish-born snipers. So actually, technically, he was born in Calgary, but Swedish, Swedish hockey aligned sniper, I suppose we could say. But yeah, I'd be shocked if Willie doesn't make the Olympics. All right, number 3 here. Interestingly, so Dave and I, we did a combined list and we both went 3 for 3 in terms of our ranking too. And it may surprise you as to who comes up at number 3 because it's not Mitch Marner. In terms of most likely, I think David Kampf is far more likely to make Czechia's team than Mitch Marner is to make Team Canada. Not to say that Marner is not going to make it, but there's going to be a bit more of a conversation with him. Whereas I think David Kampf certainly makes it. I mean, he was on the World Championship team. He did great for them. They win silver, gold. Did they win gold actually? I think they might end up winning gold. He medaled. He brought home a medal. I can't remember which one, but he brought home a medal for sure. And he ended up having a great tournament. They won gold.
It was Czechia. They beat Switzerland.
Yeah. So
Canada lost to Sweden.
Yes, they did. So David Kampf, I think for sure is going to be on Team Czechia, and he'll be at the 2026 Olympics.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I know that people have an opinion right now of David Kampf because of his contract, but internationally, he's always, again, they don't have many top end NHL players. I do have a few, but like Czechia, he's gonna definitely be a factor there. I'm curious if Yager has like a role with the manager. I couldn't see why not.
Management.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I was going to say Yager pops in there and plays.
Yeah, still plays hockey. He would love to. Nothing more to be on there.
Honestly, if there was one guy who could probably just like parachute into a team and actually play, it probably would be Yager with Czechia. You're not actually all that wrong. If you wanted one more crack at an Olympic gold, I could see him shoehorning himself in there. Probably, go play for his team that he owns, that he plays in the Czech league there or the Swiss league, whichever one he's working in. I could see him, being a player coach type of thing, working his way into an Olympic spot. Wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you. But certainly David Kampf. 4th on our list of Leafs most likely to play at the 2026 Olympics, we do have Mitch Marner. And I think this is where it goes from like locks to a good chance, but there will be some conversations when it comes to Mitch Marner. I do think there's a good chance that Mitch Marner's on the team. And if I had to make a wager on FanDuel of whether or not he's a Canadian Olympian in 2026, I would probably side with him being on the team. But it's not a guaranteed lock like the other three, which is why I think having him at number 4 is probably the correct ranking for most likely, which is what this ranking is all about.
Well, we're also looking at if you're making a Canadian roster, how far down the list of forwards do you go before you mention Mitch Marner's name?
Well, not that far to be
Like,
fair.
I'm not saying he's like going to be, sitting on the bench the last few players and be like, "Hey, pick me." But like when you're rallying off your list, he's not even in my first like 4.
Let me see who some like current projected Team Canada teams look like. Team Canada 2026. Is for whatever reason off the top of my head, I'm having a tough time coming up with like guaranteed players here. But like
well, like I
obviously
said,
like McKinnon, McDavid, I think Crosby will definitely probably gonna still be on that team. Bedard will probably be on that team. Braden Point. Yeah, Braden Point. But then you get, Zach Hyman will probably end up being on that team.
Sam Reinhart.
But like, are you gonna take Reinhart over Marner? No.
Probably.
If it came down to those two players, I mean, Mitch Marner gives you defensive value too, right?
Yeah, I mean Reinhardt's. It'll be interesting to see how he comes off of this season where he scored 50 goals, right, and things like that. Yeah, like of course, like Marner probably is within like that. Like when you bring that initial group, he's probably right there, right after those guys.
You know what? I'm starting to think actually that he's more of a lock than I was giving him credit for. I'm looking at like a projected roster right now that was curated, I guess, by was this the hockey writers. Now they could be missing some guys that I'm just not thinking of, but Mitch Marner certainly belongs on this list over a lot of guys on this team. Like they've got Dylan Cousins on this team, like Robert Thomas, Nuge, Mark Stone, Verhaeghe, Jared McCann is on this team according to them. I don't know about that. I would think that Brad Marchand, if he's still kicking, will probably be able to fight for a spot here. Maybe Adam Fantilli, if he does have that glow up in the next couple of years, could fight his way onto this team here. But I do think that Mitch Marner is probably going to end up being pretty close to a lock to make the group. But he's probably closer to being a lock actually than I gave credit for earlier on in the podcast. I kind of take that back. I think the drop off.
I would say maybe 3. If you put him over Camp at 3, I don't think like anyone's batting an eyelash over that. But like when you're talking about like Matthews and even Nylander, those two guys are going to be central. They're going to be like
leaders.
They're the leaders, like
the guys.
They are going to be the guys. Marner,
yeah.
I mean, I think Craig Button had him low down on his list of like lines, like almost near the bottom. Like fourth.
Well, I mean, you could put him on a third line, and he's like defensively responsible. You could put him on a checking line, right? So, I don't think it necessarily speaks to how. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is all NHL right winger like 2 years in a row. So, like, he's one of the best right wingers in the NHL. So I don't want to get to international. You get a lot of centers that start to move off into the wing that kind of could push some of these wingers down a little bit on the depth chart. But I still think Mitch Marner is for sure like a top 9 guy on this Team Canada team. As for number 5, there were kind of 2 guys, and I asked you. So we're split again, much like we were last time. Actually, we're split on who maybe has more of a chance of being on the 2026 Olympic squad. So, Dave, you had Oliver Ekman-Larsson as kind of the next guy who's a maybe, not a for sure, but a maybe, and has a good chance possibly to make Team Sweden. I also had a Swedish player. Pontus Holmberg is a guy who I think has a chance to also make the 2026 Olympic roster, kind of more of a bottom of the roster type of guy, but he was at the
World
World
Championship.
Championship this past year for Sweden. So he's definitely on the international radar for them. And I think Holmberg's only getting better. Like, I don't think he's going to be a top 6 stud superstar, but he's finding his way in the NHL. And I think that there's certainly a role for a guy like that on a Swedish team, whether it's fourth line center, fourth line winger, third line winger, possibly for a guy like Holmberg. I think that he's got a decent chance to be on an Olympic team come 2026.
I do too. I just don't know if I would guarantee him a spot.
Yeah,
There's going to
not a
be
guarantee.
other young forwards over the next couple of years. Like, we're talking 2 years, no, just under 2 years from now. There'll be some younger players, I think, that will push the envelope for a guy like Pontus Holmberg. Again, the same could be said about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, right? He's not a young player, right? He is up there in age, so that will factor. But I just think when you look at the Swedish defensemen, they're going to probably want some experience, and he's going to be like between him, Hedman, and Carlson. I feel like those three are the ones that they'll look at initially as like their primary veteran defensemen going into the Olympics.
Possibly you've got Dahlin, who I think is
like Dahlin's
above.
a lock. I like Dahlin's a lock.
Yeah. Carlson, Gus Forsling. Forsling's a lock at this point.
Yeah.
Forsling's going to be a lock. Colm, Hedman, Hampus, Lindholm.
Yeah.
OEL. We'll see. We'll see on OEL. That one, he's gonna have to show well over the next 2 years, I think, for Toronto, for him to if he is on the Olympic team, that means that he's done well for Toronto over the next couple of years. So a lot of Leaf fans probably gonna be pumping their pom-poms for Ekman-Larsson to make the squad, because that'll mean that he had some production for the Leafers over the next 2 seasons, if that is to be the case.
Yeah.
All right, so there's the Friday 5-pack of the 5 players most likely to play in the 2026 Olympics. We are in lockstep on the first 4, with Austin Matthews being the most likely, followed by William Nylander, David Kampf, and Mitch Marner, kind of a coin flip 3-4, and then a little less likely, but still a good chance for one of either Pontus Holmberg or Oliver Ekman-Larsson to make one of the final spots for Team Sweden. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Enjoy the kickoff to the Olympic Games. Opening ceremonies coming up later tonight. Enjoy that. And we'll be back with you on Monday. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.